As a disclaimer, this is a student presentation for the UAMS Environmental and Occupational Health Department using a hypothetical situation and position for educational purposes only. Hi everyone, my name is Sydney Baker and I'm an environmental health specialist with the Arkansas Health Department, meaning that I specialize in how your environment impacts you and your health. And today I will be talking to all of you, the Lonoke County residents, about endocrine disruptors and how they may impact your health. Before we begin, here's just a brief overview of what we'll be covering in today's presentation. First, we'll define endocrine disruptors and discuss how they affect your body. Then, we'll be discussing the elements of the endocrine system, including some of the organs and some of the hormones and their functions. Following that, cover the most commonly recognized endocrine disruptors and how they may get into your body. Then we'll discuss the best courses of action to take if you've been exposed to an endocrine disruptor. Finally, we'll go over how you can avoid and reduce your exposure to endocrine disruptors, as well as some sources to provide you with materials if you would like to do more independent research outside of this presentation. If you've ever seen a product label or advertisement that says that a product is BPA-free or made with non-toxic plastics, you may be wondering what exactly this means and why that's important. BPA-free products are created without this potentially harmful material, which is a known endocrine disruptor. The Environmental Protection Agency, or the EPA, defines an endocrine disruptor as an exogenous agent that interferes with synthesis, secretion, transport, metabolism, binding action, or elimination of natural blood-borne hormones that are present in the body and are responsible for homeostasis, reproduction, and developmental process. That is a very long and complex definition that just simply means that an endocrine disruptor is a chemical that comes from outside of your body that can mimic and interfere with the hormones that your body produces to help regulate some of your vital bodily functions. To understand more about endocrine disruptors, we will briefly explore the endocrine system. Your endocrine system is a body system that is made up of multiple organs and glands, including the hypothalamus, pituitary gland, and pineal gland in the brain, the thyroid, parathyroid, and thymus, which are located in the neck and throat, the pancreas, which is located just under your stomach, the adrenal glands, located right on top of your kidneys, and the reproductive organs of the ovaries, placenta, and testicles. In addition to the multiple organs on the previous slide, the endocrine system is also composed of hormones that regulate your vital bodily functions such as sleep, heart rate, breathing rate, puberty, growth, digestion, menstruation, childbirth, and breastfeeding. Here on the right, I've made a table of some of the more commonly known hormones such as epinephrine, or as it's more commonly known, adrenaline, which helps increase your heart rate, breathing rate, and blood flow during times of stress such as when running from danger or having an allergic reaction. There's also estrogen and testosterone, which control and regulate female and male characteristic development, insulin, which lowers your blood sugar, melatonin, which helps with sleeping, and oxytocin, which helps the uterus contract for childbirth and helps for breast milk duct development. There are also several more hormones that aren't listed that also help control our bodily functions, but again, these are just some of the more commonly known ones, but if you haven't heard of them, that's perfectly fine too. Now that we know a bit more detail about the endocrine system, we can see more clearly why endocrine disruptors can be dangerous. Scientists began paying attention to endocrine disrupting chemicals during the 1960s when wildlife studies showed abnormal reproductive patterns in wild animals, which kick-started the research into what was causing these odd patterns. In the 1970s, a drug known as DES that was prescribed to pregnant women to prevent miscarriages sparked a conversation around the endocrine disruption in humans. This drug was found to have caused increased rates of reproductive cancers, ovarian malformations and cysts, and tissue changes in both the women and mice that were studied. Since those first studies were published, more research has been conducted to concretely identify the dangers of these chemicals. While there is limited data on the effects of these chemicals have on humans, animal studies of the past and present have shown evidence that these chemicals can mimic and alter hormones, leading to problems like increased risks of some cancers, immune and nervous system dysfunction, and even poor brain and fetal development. Now that we've gone over the details of the endocrine system and what these materials can do, you may be wondering what some of these chemicals are and how to identify them. The most widely recognized endocrine disrupting chemicals are bisphenol A, or BPA, and phthalates. Most of these chemicals are in common plastics and flame retardants, as well as everyday materials such as lotions, nail polishes, and other products that we may use for various reasons. BPA is mostly found in plastics such as water bottles, baby bottles and sippy cups, and plastic food containers. It's also found in the lining of food cans to prevent corrosion. Most of the effects of this chemical were observed in young children and infants. Phthalates can be found in chemical fragrances, some cosmetics, and some plastics that make toys and food packaging. Some others are perchlorates, which are created from aerospace and pharmaceutical manufacturing processes, and phytoestrogens, which can be found in tofu and some soy-based products. Unfortunately, when it comes to potential exposure, there is not much guidance on what to do if you suspect you've been exposed to these chemicals, as research regarding their effects in humans is consistently ongoing and an adequate testing procedure has not yet been established. The best courses of action are to reduce and avoid potential exposures through a few steps that will be discussed in the next few slides, and to pay attention to your body and visit your doctor if you feel like something is wrong so that they can advise you on the next steps to take. Though there's not much to do if you've already been exposed to these chemicals, there are other things you can do to reduce further exposure. Luckily, many brands, companies, and even some U.S. government regulatory bodies have limited the usage of some of these chemicals like BPA and phthalates to reduce exposure to these chemicals. For example, most baby product and water bottle manufacturers abandon the use of BPA, leading to an official statement from the FDA to no longer provide for the usage of the product in baby products, as the use of the chemical had been mostly abandoned by the manufacturing companies themselves anyways, as young children are suspected to be the most impacted by exposure to BPA. The U.S. government has also banned children's products and toys that have more than 0.1% of their total weight made of phthalates. This ban mostly affected toys like rubber ducks and other soft plastic toys that children could put in their mouths. While this is good news, there are still some things you can do to further reduce your exposure to endocrine disrupting chemicals. The first tip is to buy and use more fresh and frozen foods when possible, as this will limit your exposure to BPA from the lining of canned goods. The second tip is to take your shoes off at home to prevent tracking dust and other particles that may contain these harmful materials around your home. This tip is especially useful if you have small children in and around your home. You can also decrease your overall use of plastics when possible. For example, you can opt for glass or stainless steel storage containers and use other less harmful materials like wood for other uses that you may use plastic for. If you do use plastics, avoid microwaving and heating them, and instead use other containers for heating, even if you still serve from plastic, as heating these materials may cause them to break down over time, leading to them leaching into food. You can also use BPA and phthalate-free products. This is most often listed on the product labels. Finally, one of the most recommended tips is to look out for symbols like the one on the right that contain the numbers 3, 6, and especially 7, as these types of plastics may have been created using BPA. While the FDA has not yet found evidence of negative health effects of these chemicals from low-dose exposures, like the ones you may get from plastic containers, it is still important to be aware and continue to reduce your exposure to these chemicals when you can. Before we go, I'd like to go over a quick summary of what we've gone over here today. First, endocrine disruptors are chemicals from outside of your body that are most often found in plastics like plastic food and beverage containers and toys. These are even found in products like cosmetics and some chemical fragrances. These chemicals interfere with the way your body produces and uses the hormones it naturally produces from organs in your endocrine system. These hormones regulate some of our vital bodily functions such as breathing, heart rate, digestion, and general growth and development. Interference of these biological processes can lead to an increased risk of some cancers and cause problems with growth, development, and functioning of multiple body systems. Research on the effects of these chemicals in humans is limited, but several animal studies have shown a cause for concern and the need to work towards reducing and eliminating exposure to these materials. BPA and phthalates are the most common chemicals, but luckily, more research and public awareness has led to more regulation and elimination of these materials to reduce exposure. The best way to avoid health effects from these chemicals is to prevent and reduce exposure by reducing plastic usage when you can, avoiding plastics labeled 3, 6, and 7 as they may be made with BPA, and to avoid eating the plastics that you eat and drink from, as this can cause the materials to break down and cause BPA and other harmful chemicals to leach into the food that you eat. Thank you all so much for your time and allowing me to present to you all today. I hope that I've helped you understand more about endocrine disrupting chemicals and the endocrine system as a whole, as well as how things in your environment can impact your health. Here are all of the sources that helped me create my presentation for today, and they're listed on these next few slides. As you can see, all of the sources I used are provided here, and they all come from reputable government, academic, and medical institutions that have accessible information regarding the endocrine system and hormones, more information about endocrine disruptors, the government regulations and rulings on these substances, and more about how to avoid these chemicals. If you would like to read these sources in full on your own, I will be happy to provide these sources for anyone who would like them and answer questions. Thank you again for your time.